Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're doing Who Was Better. The contestants this week, two best friends, two former rivals, Lita and Trish Stratus. Two women who in the 2000s were considered two of the best women wrestlers in the world, two of the women that really helped destigmatize women's wrestling in WWE and move it forward to where it was taken a little bit more seriously. Let's get into this. Let's see how well they do, see who fares better. We're going to rate them in 8 different categories. Each category is rated on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. At the end, we're going to total up the points. Whoever has the most wins. There is a chance for 5 bonus points, and we'll talk about that here at the end. With that being said, let's jump right in. Our first category, technical wrestling. Basically, this is your submissions, your chain wrestling, your suplexes, all that fun stuff. For Lita, Lita's getting a 3. I don't think Lita's bad at this. I think she's right about average. And a lot of that has to do with the style she wrestled. I would put her on a similar vein that I would put someone like a Jeff Hardy, because their styles weren't predicated on throwing suplexes or putting you in a Boston Crab. Their styles were predicated on doing some fantastic move. So for that, Lita gets a 3. Now going on to Trish. Trish, I'm going to give a 4. Trish was a little bit more grounded and more chain wrestling involved than Lita was, in my opinion. And while I don't think that Trish was on the level of some of the other women of that era, and that's basically who I'm grading this against, like a Gail Kim or a Mickie James, I do think she was right there just below them. So for that, Trish gets a 4. Next category, striking. This is your kicks, your clotheslines, your punches, forearms, headbutts, all that fun stuff, anything you would consider a strike. For Lita, Lita's getting a 4. This is one thing I think that she does excel at. A lot of her strikes were really hard hitting, really gave that appeal of a real fight, and when I grade someone for striking, to me it's, does it look realistic? Does it look like you'd see something in like a UFC fight or a street fight? And Lita, she was great at this. Trish is also getting a 4. Like I said with Lita, this is probably the stronger point of both women's attributes. They both had that somewhat brawler mentality to them, and it was kind of the style of wrestling when they were at the height of their popularity. So yeah, they both get 4s here. Next up, how they perform as a heel. First, we're going with Lita. Lita's getting a 5. This is mostly on the back of her run with Edge. I thought her heel run with Edge, she added so much to the Edge character that elevated him past the mid-card and into the upper card, that you have to give her a lot of the credit for that. Just her being there, just her willingness to delve into some really touchy subjects, especially dealing with real life and real life relationships at that time. I thought she was awesome as a heel. That's why she gets a 5. Now for Trish is getting a 4. The reason why I put Trish just a smidge below Lita is I don't think she ever had that like quintessential heel run. Whether it be her with Jericho or Christian or just on her own, I don't think she ever had a run where you look at it and you go, okay, that's a heel. That's somebody that's dastardly. She was good when she was asked to perform as a heel, but I don't think she crossed that bar into the great realm. That's why she gets a... Next category, how they perform as baby faces. For both of them, I'm giving them both a 5. A lot of this is when they were baby faces, how much the crowd was behind them, how much it resonated with everybody watching, and you'd be hard-pressed to find 2 women babyface wrestlers of any era that were as popular and as engaging with the crowd as these 2 women were. I think this is both of their strong points as far as between a babyface and a heel. They're both naturally baby faces. They're both people you want to cheer. That's why they both get a 5. Next category, promos. For Lita is getting a 2. And the reason I say that, I kind of grade everything where 3 is a middle. If you're just good, you're serviceable, you pass, you get a 3. If you're below that, like let's say for instance this was school, a 3 would be a C. If you, in my opinion, are below that like Lita is here, I would mark her as a D if I was giving her a school grade, because her promos weren't totally in the realm of just terrible, but they never really moved anything forward. They never really added anything. She was more carried by her persona and her in-ring reactions and how she acted off of other people than she ever was by her promos. That's why she's marked so low. For Trish, Trish is right at the Mendoza line. She gets a 3. I do think she was a bit better at promos, but again, I don't think she ever had that fire, that extra gear that someone that cuts a great promo like a Becky Lynch has, or like people of her generation, a Chris Jericho would have. But to me, she wasn't as cringy as, say, Lita was. Lita had some very cringy and awkward moments, and Trish did in the beginning a bit, but I think that was more of how she was presented than her abilities herself. Even with that, I don't think she ever got past mediocrity again. She gets a 3. Next up, presentation. This is your Titantron, this is your ring gear, your entrances, all that stuff. For this, Lita's getting a 5. It's instantly memorable, whether you remember her as part of the Hardy Boys presentation, as part of Edge's presentation, whether you remember her thong hanging out the back of her cargo pants, her crop top. You remember Lita, and you remember she had a great song too, and the song was awesome. They actually both had pretty good theme songs that fit them both pretty well. I think she had that perfect, how can I say, early 2000s alternative girl look, kind of like a Gwen Stefani would have, or an Avril Lavigne would have, something of that nature. Instantly memorable, instantly sticks out in my head. Now for Trish is going to get a 3 here. And hear me out on this one, because I know you're going to say she had some memorable stuff, like her song, everybody knows her song immediately when that first line comes out. But think of everything else she was presented as. Was her gear any different than 90% of women through history? Not really. There were a couple times where she had some memorable gear, like when she wore the Canadian flag inspired stuff, but for the most part it was very pedestrian, very much default create a wrestler on a wrestling game. She did have the hat and the jacket, but again, how many women wrestlers have came to the ring with a cowboy hat on? And yes, I might be critiquing it a little bit, but when I look at things like this, I look at Lita, and there are people that tried to copy Lita, but Lita wasn't a copy. And not saying that Trish was a copy, but if Victoria came out in Trish's ring gear, would you notice a difference? If Trish came out in Gail Kim's ring gear, would you notice a difference? It's very interchangeable. That's why for her presentation, she's just about average. Next category, charisma. For both of them, they're both getting a 5. They both had that kind of charisma where all they had to do was show up on your screen and you immediately connected with them. Whether it was the out-of-this-world fitness model looks of Trish Stratus, one of the most beautiful women in wrestling, or Lita, the tomboy next door who was also drop-dead gorgeous, kind of a she's all that moment where you realize that your friend is beautiful as well. They had that charisma, and they had that thing where their characters fit their personalities. And you just connected. You wanted to cheer for these wrestlers. You wanted to get behind them. They had that ability to draw a crowd in. That's why they get to be a Raw main event when women never main evented Raw back in the day. That's why they got to have high-profile WrestleMania matches and wrestling matches all through there, and pay-per-view matches, because of that charisma and that connection with the crowd. They both get a 5 in my opinion. I think they're really, really great in this category. Last but not least, big game performance. When they do get those moments where they're the main event of Raw for the first time for women in maybe ever, and if not at least 10 years, for the pay-per-views they had against each other and against other opponents, they stepped it up. They did not waste the opportunity, and they did not take the ball and run it backwards and take women's wrestling backwards. They forwarded the progress. They made it go forward. They made the perception change a bit. And yes, I know at the same time TNA had the amazing Knockouts division, which was revolutionary for America and probably the best women's wrestling division in any division in a major company in North American history. But for WWE, what they were doing and how they performed on those big stages, they both get a 5. I can't knock either one of them because they pushed everything forward, at least on the WWE level. Finally, let's get into their totals. Lita's going to have a total of 34 points. Trish Stratus, 33. Now here's where it gets interesting. There is a chance for 5 bonus points. Every Wednesday, I put a poll on the community page here on YouTube. I let you guys decide who you think is the better of the two, and whoever wins that gets a chance at 5 bonus points. For the first time, with over 600 votes, as you can see here, there was a dead tie, 50-50. That's never happened since I've been doing these videos, which tells me these were two women that were good to have go against each other because they were very equally matched. For that, neither one is going to get a bonus, so we're going to leave it at where it was, 34-33. Lita gets the win. Lita ends up being who was better of the two. And now, this is subjective. Again, this is my opinion. You could have other categories you rate them on. You could think I'm totally insane with some of my ratings. I understand that. These women are very much tied to each other and very historical any way you look at it. The reason I like doing these, and the reason, if you notice, every time I do one of these, there's some connection. Like Rob Van Dam and Sabu, same kind of thing. They were tag team partners, they were rivals. The Outsiders, they're former tag team partners. Or like Savage and Steamboat, former rivals. There's always that connection of the two people, and that's why I like having that. And it's always awesome to kind of look back at these and see exactly where they fit. I understand if you think Trish might have been better, but for me, for this video, Lita gets the win. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching Who Was Better.